My daughter had not responded to my messages for 5 days, so without warning, I went to her house. When I arrived, my grandson said she had left on a business trip. I was about to leave when I noticed fresh soil under the living room rug. I froze, and then my son-in-law appeared with his hands covered in dirt. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The silence was what frightened me most. 5 days without a word from Catherine. 5 days of messages left unread. Calls going straight to voicemail. That peculiar modern void that fills a mother's heart with dread. At 63 years old, I've learned to trust my instincts, and every fiber of my being screamed that something was terribly wrong. I stood in my kitchen that Thursday morning, staring at my phone screen, reading the last message I'd sent the night before. "Katie, please just tell me you're okay. I'm worried sick." 2 blue check marks. She'd seen it. She just wasn't answering. My daughter Catherine wasn't the type to go silent. Even during her busiest field seasons as a geologist, she'd send quick texts, share photos of rock formations that meant nothing to me but everything to her. She'd call while driving between sites, her voice animated as she explained fault lines and sediment layers with the passion of someone who'd found her true calling. But now, nothing. I made my decision over cold coffee and toast I couldn't eat. I would drive to Boulder. Unannounced. Uninvited, perhaps. But I was her mother, and mothers don't ignore the alarm bells that ring in the dead of night. The 3-hour drive from my small farmhouse outside Fort Collins gave me too much time to think. Catherine had always been independent, even as a child. While other little girls played with dolls, she collected rocks, labeled them with careful handwriting, arranged them by type and color. She'd married Kenneth right out of graduate school, another geologist, and together they'd built a life around their shared passion. They had one child, my grandson Thomas, now 16, and probably mortified by his parents' enthusiasm for minerals and tectonic plates. I'd met Kenneth's parents only a handful of times. Cold people. His mother had passed away 2 years ago, and his father had remarried quickly, moved to Arizona, barely kept in touch. Kenneth seemed fine with the distance. Catherine had become my whole world after my husband Robert died 6 years ago. Losing her silence felt like losing her entirely. Boulder appeared through morning mist, the flatirons rising like sentinels behind the city. I knew the way to Catherine's house by heart. A comfortable 2-story craftsman in an older neighborhood, with Kenneth's vintage truck usually parked in the driveway, and Catherine's Subaru beside it. Both vehicles were there when I arrived, which should have been reassuring, but somehow wasn't. I sat in my car for a moment, gathering courage. What if I was overreacting? What if Catherine was simply overwhelmed with work, her phone died, and I was about to embarrass myself as a helicopter parent at 63? But 5 days. 5 days was too long. I knocked on the front door, my hand trembling slightly. Footsteps approached, and the door opened to reveal Thomas, tall and lanky, with his mother's dark hair and his father's serious eyes. He looked surprised to see me. "Grandma, what are you doing here?" "I came to see your mother," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "Is she home?" Thomas glanced over his shoulder, an odd, nervous gesture. "She's actually on a business trip. Left on Monday." Monday. The day her messages had stopped. "A business trip?" I repeated. "Where?" Somewhere in Wyoming, I think. Dad would know more. He's in the backyard." Something in Thomas's voice didn't ring true. He was a terrible liar, always had been. Even as a small child, he'd flush red when trying to hide the truth about broken vases or eaten cookies. "Well, I drove all this way," I said, stepping past him into the house. "I might as well say hello to Kenneth." The living room looked normal at first glance. Comfortable furniture, bookshelves lined with geology texts and family photos, Catherine's collection of unusual minerals displayed in a glass cabinet. But there was something off. Something my instincts caught before my conscious mind could identify it. "I'll get Dad," Thomas said quickly, disappearing toward the back of the house. I stood alone in the living room, that uneasy feeling growing stronger. My eyes swept the space, looking for what didn't belong. The coffee table had been moved slightly. I could see the indent marks in the carpet where it usually sat. The large area rug under the sofa seemed newer than I remembered. Or perhaps freshly cleaned. No, not cleaned. Disturbed. I knelt down, my knees protesting slightly, and lifted the edge of the rug. Underneath, the hardwood floor looked different. Cleaner in some spots, as if recently scrubbed. And there, near the corner, something that made my breath catch. Fresh soil. Not dust. Not the usual household dirt that accumulates over time. This was actual soil, dark and slightly damp, the kind you'd find in a garden or a yard. Several small clumps of it pressed into the cracks between the floorboards. I let the rug fall back into place and stood up quickly, my heart hammering. Why would there be fresh soil under the living room rug? Rose? I turned to find Kenneth standing in the doorway from the kitchen, and the sight of him sent a chill down my spine. He wore old jeans and a flannel shirt, both streaked with dirt, but it was his hands that captured my attention. His hands were covered in soil, dirt caked under his fingernails, smears across his palms and wrists. "Kenneth," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I came to check on Catherine. Thomas said she's on a business trip?" His face remained neutral, but I saw something flicker in his eyes. Wariness? Calculation? "That's right," he said. "Last-minute consulting job. She left Monday morning." "Without telling me?" "We talk almost every day. It came up suddenly. You know how it is in her field." He moved toward the kitchen sink, began washing his hands with methodical precision. "Sorry you drove all this way for nothing." I watched the soil swirl down the drain, dark against white porcelain. "What were you doing in the backyard?" "Gardening," he said quickly, too quickly. "Getting the beds ready for spring planting." It was mid-March. In Colorado, the ground had barely thawed. "I see," I said softly. We stood in silence for a moment, the running water the only sound. Kenneth's shoulders were tense, his movements controlled. This wasn't the relaxed, friendly son-in-law I'd known for 18 years. This was a man under tremendous pressure, barely holding something back. "When will Catherine be home?" I asked. "Hard to say. Maybe another week." Another week. That would be almost 2 weeks of silence. "I'd like her to call me," I said firmly. "Today, if possible." "Of course. I'll have her reach out as soon as she can." But he didn't meet my eyes when he said it. I left the house with promises to visit again soon, with Thomas waving from the doorway looking guilty and relieved. But I didn't drive home. Instead, I parked 3 blocks away, my mind racing through what I'd seen. Fresh soil under the living room rug. Kenneth covered in dirt, hands filthy at 10 in the morning. Catherine gone for 5 days without a word. Thomas lying badly about a business trip. And then I noticed something that tightened my chest. In the living room, one of Catherine's leather field journals sat on the bookshelf exactly where she would leave it when she was home for days at a time. She usually carried a notebook on any trip, even the short ones. But this one hadn't been touched. It didn't fit the story. I pulled out my phone and opened my messages with Catherine. Scrolled back through our conversation history. Hundreds of messages, photos of rocks and Thomas's school events and family dinners. Then I reached Monday morning, the last time we'd communicated normally. Her final message to me had been at 6:47 a.m. "Morning, Mom. Big day ahead. Love you. Big day ahead. Not business trip, not traveling. Big day." What kind of big day ends with 5 days of silence, fresh soil under rugs, and a husband with dirt-covered hands claiming his wife is in Wyoming? I sat in my car as the morning sun climbed higher, and I felt the old familiar sensation I hadn't experienced in years. The feeling I'd had as a young woman when Robert and I had faced down the bank trying to foreclose on our farm. The feeling I'd had when doctors told me my husband had only months to live, and I'd researched and advocated until we found a treatment that gave us 3 more precious years. The feeling of knowing that something was deeply, dangerously wrong, and that I was the only one who could set it right. I started my car, but I didn't head home. Instead, I drove to the Boulder Public Library, found a quiet computer terminal, and began to search. Catherine Lewis, geologist. Kenneth Lewis, geologist. Recent news, recent discoveries, recent fieldwork in Colorado and Wyoming. What I found in the next hour would change everything. There had been unusual seismic activity reported in northwestern Colorado over the past month. Small tremors, barely noticeable, but enough to catch the attention of geological surveys. And 3 weeks ago, Catherine had posted on her professional social media about potentially groundbreaking fieldwork that could reshape our understanding of regional geology. The post had been deleted. I searched for Kenneth's name next, found his university profile. His recent publications included papers on rare earth minerals and geological formations that could indicate significant mineral deposits. The kind of deposits that could be worth millions. The kind that people would kill to control. My hands were shaking as I closed the browser and sat back in the hard library chair. Catherine hadn't gone on a business trip. She had found something. Something big enough to make her go into hiding. Something valuable enough that Kenneth was literally burying evidence in their living room. And something dangerous enough that my daughter, my brilliant, careful, loving daughter, had chosen to disappear rather than reach out to her own mother for help. I gathered my purse, my resolve hardening into something sharp and unbreakable. I had raised Catherine to be smart, to be cautious, to trust her instincts. If she had gone silent, it was because speaking was dangerous. But I had instincts too. 63 years of them. And I would uncover every buried secret, face down every threat, and tear apart every lie until I found the truth, even if that truth was buried under the floorboards of my daughter's living room. I spent that first night back in my farmhouse making lists. It's what I've always done when facing impossible problems. Robert used to tease me about it, but those lists had saved our farm more than once. Now I needed them to save my daughter. On one page, everything I knew. On another, everything I needed to find out. On a third, people I could trust. That last page remained distressingly blank. I tried calling Catherine again at midnight, then at 2 a.m., then at dawn. Nothing. The voicemail greeting in her cheerful voice felt like mockery now. "Hi, you've reached Katie Lewis. Leave a message and I'll get back to you soon." Except she wouldn't. Friday morning, I drove back to Boulder with a plan. If Kenneth wouldn't tell me the truth, I'd find someone who would. I started with Catherine's department at the Colorado School of Mines, where she taught part-time while running her consulting business. The geology building was all glass and modern angles, so different from the agricultural extension offices I'd frequented during my farming years. A young woman at the front desk looked up with a practiced smile. "I'm looking for information about Dr. Catherine Lewis," I said. "I'm her mother." The smile faltered slightly. "Dr. Lewis is on leave right now." "Leave? What kind of leave?" "I'm not really supposed to discuss personnel matters, but since your family—" She lowered her voice. "She requested emergency personal leave on Monday. Very sudden. Dean Patterson was pretty upset about it, actually. She was supposed to lead a field seminar this week. Emergency leave, not a business trip." Another lie from Kenneth. "Did she say what the emergency was?" "No, ma'am. Just that it was urgent and she'd be unreachable for a while." The receptionist hesitated. "Is everything okay?" "Dr. Lewis is one of our favorites around here." "I'm sure it will be," I said, though I was sure of nothing. I left the building and sat in my car, crossing off one avenue of investigation. Catherine had covered her tracks professionally. Whatever she was running from, she'd done it carefully, deliberately. My phone rang. "Thomas." "Grandma?" His voice was strained. "Dad said you came by yesterday." "I did. I'm worried about your mother, Thomas." A long pause. "She's fine. She's just working." "Thomas, sweetheart, I know you're lying to me. I can hear it in your voice. Please, if something is wrong—" "Nothing's wrong." The denial came too fast, too sharp. "I have to go." "I've got school." He hung up before I could respond. I stared at the phone, hurt warring with determination. They'd gotten to Thomas, convinced him to lie, or frightened him into it. I decided to try a different approach. Catherine's best friend from graduate school, Sandra, now worked at the United States Geological Survey office in Denver. If anyone knew what Catherine had been working on, it would be Sandra. The USGS building required signing in, getting a visitor's badge, being escorted. Security had tightened since my last visit years ago. Sandra met me in the lobby, her face lighting up with genuine warmth before clouding with concern. "Rose, what a surprise. Is everything— Can we talk somewhere private?" She led me to a small conference room with windows overlooking the city. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. When did you last hear from Catherine? Sandra blinked. Last Friday, I think. We had coffee. She seemed excited about something, but she was being cagey about the details. Said she'd tell me more once she verified some data. Why? She's been silent for 5 days. Kenneth claims she's on a business trip, but I don't believe him. Sandra's expression shifted from confused to alarmed. That's not like Katie at all. She would have told me if she was traveling. We always coordinate our field schedules. What was she excited about? What kind of data? She wouldn't say exactly. But she mentioned something about rare earth elements and unusual geological formations in Moffat County. Asked me some weird questions about legal protocols for reporting significant mineral discoveries on private versus public land. My pulse quickened. Rare earth elements? Those are valuable, aren't they? Extremely. They're critical for technology, batteries, defense applications. The U.S. is almost entirely dependent on foreign sources, mostly China. If Katie found a significant domestic deposit, Sandra trailed off, understanding dawning in her eyes. Oh no. What? Rose, a discovery like that could be worth billions, but it would also attract the wrong kind of attention. Mining companies, investors, even government interests. If someone found out before she could properly document and file her claims, they'd want to steal it. I finished. Sandra nodded slowly. Or worse, make sure she couldn't prove she found it first. The room seemed to tilt slightly. I gripped the edge of the table. I need to find her, Sandra. I need to know she's safe. Let me make some calls, Sandra said, pulling out her phone. See if anyone in the field has heard from her or Kenneth recently. While Sandra stepped into the hallway, I sat alone with my spiraling thoughts. My daughter had found something that could change her life. Instead of celebrating, she was hiding. And Kenneth, the man I'd trusted with my daughter's happiness, was lying to everyone. Sandra returned 20 minutes later, her face grim. I called 4 colleagues who work in northwestern Colorado. 3 haven't heard from Katie in weeks. But the 4th, Jim Hendricks, said something interesting. He was doing routine survey work near Craig on Tuesday and saw Kenneth's truck parked at a trailhead leading to some old mining claims. When Jim approached, Kenneth was loading equipment into the truck and looked, quote, extremely nervous. Said he was just doing preliminary site work and practically jumped in the truck and drove off. Craig is in Moffat County, isn't it? Yes. And those old mining claims are technically abandoned, which means anyone who discovers something new there could file fresh claims. It's complicated legally, but potentially very lucrative. I stood up, decision crystallizing. I need to go there. To those mining claims. Rose, no. If this is what I think it is, you could be walking into something dangerous. Let me contact the authorities, maybe the Bureau of Land Management, and tell them what? That my daughter is on a business trip? That her husband was doing field work? We have no proof of anything illegal, Sandra. Just suspicions. Then let me come with you. I shook my head firmly. If something goes wrong, Thomas will need someone who knows the truth. Stay here. Stay safe. If I don't call you within 24 hours, then you contact authorities. Sandra looked torn, but finally nodded. At least let me give you the coordinates of where Jim saw Kenneth's truck. And Rose, be careful. People have done terrible things for far less than what Katie might have found. I left Denver with GPS coordinates, a full tank of gas, and a gnawing fear that I was already too late. The drive northwest took me through increasingly remote terrain. Rolling plains gave way to sagebrush flats, then to the dramatic canyons and mesas near the Utah border. Craig was a small town that had seen better days, its economy still recovering from coal industry decline. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business. I stopped at a gas station to fuel up and asked the attendant, a weathered man in his 50s, if he'd seen a woman matching Catherine's description. Geologist type? Yeah, couple weeks back. Her and a man, bought supplies, asked about road conditions heading toward Juniper Canyon. Seemed in a hurry. Did you see which way they went? He pointed north. Old County Road 12. But ma'am, that area's pretty rough. You planning to head up there alone? Just looking for my daughter. Something in my voice must have convinced him not to argue. He sold me a detailed topographic map and a first aid kit, which did nothing to calm my nerves. County Road 12 was barely a road at all. Rutted dirt, scattered with rocks, it wound through increasingly desolate country. My sedan protested every bump, and I silently wished I'd thought to rent something with four-wheel drive. 3 miles in, I found Kenneth's truck. It was pulled off the road, partially hidden behind a cluster of juniper trees. Empty. Locked. I peered through the windows and saw field equipment in the back. Water bottles, a sleeping bag. Signs of use, but no signs of where Kenneth had gone, or where my daughter was. I consulted Sandra's coordinates and the topographic map. The old mining claims were about a mile northeast, accessible only by foot trail. The sun was already starting its afternoon descent. I had maybe 4 hours of good daylight left. I should have turned back. A sensible woman, a cautious mother, would have returned to town, called the sheriff. Let professionals handle it. But I'd spent my entire life being sensible and cautious, and it had never saved anyone I loved. Robert had died despite my caution. The farm had nearly been lost despite my sensible planning. Sometimes sensible meant being too late. I locked my car, shouldered my purse with my phone and the map, and started walking. The trail was faint, marked occasionally by old cairns and faded paint blazes on rocks. This was high desert country, beautiful and merciless. Sagebrush released its sharp scent as I brushed past. Hawks circled overhead, riding thermals in the vast blue sky. Half a mile in, I found the first sign that I was on the right track. A survey stake, bright orange, newly placed, the kind geologists use to mark sites of interest. And next to it, pressed into a patch of bare dirt, a boot print that looked like Catherine's size. My heart soared. She had been here. Recently? I moved faster, following the occasional survey stakes, my breath coming harder in the thin air. At 63, I wasn't as spry as I once was, but determination pushed me forward. The sun was lower when I crested a ridge and saw it. An old mine entrance, partially collapsed, with fresh excavation around it. Someone had been digging, clearing debris from the opening. Equipment lay scattered around, shovels, sample bags, a portable drilling rig, and near the entrance, a tent. "Catherine?" I called out, my voice echoing off the rocks. Nothing. I approached the tent cautiously, fear coiling in my stomach. What if I found something I couldn't bear to see? What if I was too late? I unzipped the tent flap. Inside were supplies, a laptop computer, Catherine's leather journal, and a satellite phone. But no Catherine. I picked up the journal with shaking hands and opened it. The last entry was dated 2 days ago. Catherine's precise handwriting filled the pages with technical notes, GPS coordinates, and sketches of rock formations. But the final paragraph made my blood run cold. Someone knows. Saw vehicle on access road yesterday. Don't recognize it. Kenneth thinks we should pull out. But we're so close. If we leave now, someone else will file claims and we'll lose everything. I've sent samples to Sandra for independent verification, but she won't get them for a few days. Need to stay hidden until then. I'm sorry, Mom. I know you're probably worried. I'll explain everything soon. I promise. The sound of footsteps on gravel made me spin around. A man stood at the mine entrance, backlit by the setting sun. Not Kenneth, someone I'd never seen before. He was in his 40s, wearing expensive outdoor gear that looked brand new, out of place in this rough country. "You must be Rose," he said, his voice smooth and cold. "Catherine's mother. I've been hoping you'd show up." My hand instinctively tightened around Catherine's journal as I faced the stranger. Every survival instinct I possessed screamed at me to run, but my feet remained planted. Running would show fear, and I'd learned long ago that predators could smell fear. "You have me at a disadvantage," I said, keeping my voice steady. "You know my name, but I don't know yours." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Let's keep it that way. What matters is that you're trespassing on a very sensitive site, Mrs. Calloway. I'm going to need you to hand over that journal and come with me." "I don't think so." His smile faded. "You don't understand the situation you've walked into." "Then enlighten me. Where's my daughter?" "Safe, for now." And she'll stay that way if you cooperate. He took a step closer, his hand moving to his jacket pocket. The journal, please. I hugged it tighter to my chest. Not until I see Catherine. That's not how this works. Then we have a problem, because I'm not leaving without her. We stood in tense silence, the desert wind whistling between the rocks. He was younger, stronger, undoubtedly armed, but I was a mother, and I'd walked into hell itself if it meant protecting my child. Mom? The voice came from behind the stranger, weak and hoarse. Catherine emerged from the mine entrance, squinting in the fading sunlight. She looked terrible, her face pale and drawn, her clothes dirty and torn. But she was alive. Relief flooded through me so powerfully my knees almost buckled. Katie, stay back, the stranger commanded, but I ignored him, moving toward my daughter. Catherine held up a warning hand. Mom, stop. Please. You shouldn't have come here. Of course I came here. You've been missing for 5 days. I'm not missing. I'm hiding. Her eyes flicked to the stranger. Or I was until Garrett's people found us. Garrett. Now I had a name. Your daughter made a remarkable discovery, Garrett said smoothly. Potentially the largest rare earth element deposit in North America, worth conservatively $30 billion. Unfortunately, she and Kenneth didn't follow proper protocols for filing their claims. That's a lie, Catherine said fiercely. We followed every legal requirement. We documented everything, filed preliminary claims with the BLM, sent samples for verification. To a federal employee who happens to be your friend, Garrett interrupted. That could be seen as collusion, especially when the claims overlap with existing mineral rights held by Apex Resources International. My mind raced, trying to understand the implications. Apex Resources? I've never heard of them. Most people haven't, Catherine said bitterly. They're a shell company that buys up abandoned mining claims all over the West. They've been dormant for years, paying minimal fees to keep the claims active. But the moment we filed our discovery, suddenly they became very interested in enforcing their rights. Because they have friends in high places, Garrett added. Federal regulators, state officials, people who can make your daughter's life very difficult if she insists on pursuing her claims. You're trying to steal her discovery, I said flatly. We're trying to prevent a legal nightmare. Mrs. Calloway, your daughter is an excellent geologist, but she's naive about how the world works. If she publishes her findings, files her claims, tries to develop this site, she'll be tied up in litigation for decades. She'll lose her house, her savings, probably her marriage. Kenneth already understands this. That's why he's been cooperating. I looked at Catherine. Kenneth's cooperating with them? Pain flashed across her face. He thinks it's the smart play. Garrett's company offered us $5 million to sign over our rights and keep quiet. Kenneth wants to take it. Says we can't fight them, that we'll lose everything if we try. $5 million. A fortune by any measure. But I could see in my daughter's eyes that it wasn't about the money. It was about being robbed of her life's greatest achievement. Where is Kenneth now? I asked. He left this morning, Catherine said quietly. Said he was going back to Boulder to think things through. But I know he's meeting with Garrett's lawyers. He's going to sign the agreement, Mom. With or without me? Betrayal. The word hung unspoken between us. Kenneth, the man Catherine had trusted with her heart and her research, was selling her out. You can't sign anything, I said firmly. This is your discovery, Katie. Your work. It doesn't matter whose work it is if Apex can prove prior claims, Garrett said. And they can. The paperwork is very clear. Then let's see this paperwork. It's confidential commercial information. How convenient. Garrett's pleasant demeanor cracked slightly. Mrs. Calloway, I've been patient because I admire your determination. But this conversation is over. You're going to return to your car, drive home, and forget you were ever here. Catherine will make the smart choice and accept our generous offer. Everyone walks away happy. And if we don't, then Catherine will face charges for trespassing on private claims, theft of mineral samples, and falsifying federal documents. She'll lose her professional license, her university position, and quite possibly her freedom. The threat hung in the air like poison. I looked at my daughter, saw the defeat in her eyes, and felt rage kindle in my chest. Not the hot, explosive kind, but the cold, calculated fury that had helped me survive every crisis I'd ever faced. "You're bluffing," I said. Garrett raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me? If you really had the legal standing you claim, you wouldn't be out here making threats in the desert. You'd have filed injunctions, sent cease and desist letters, had federal marshals escort Catherine off the property. Instead, you're trying to intimidate a woman half your size into giving up her rights. Which tells me your claims aren't as solid as you pretend." A muscle twitched in Garrett's jaw. "You're out of your depth, old woman." "Perhaps. But I've been underestimated before, and it's never ended well for the other party." Catherine was staring at me with something like wonder. I'd always been the quiet mother, the supportive one, the one who baked cookies and sent care packages. She'd never seen this side of me, the side that had gone toe-to-toe with bank executives and government inspectors, and won. "Mom, what are you doing?" she whispered. "Calling his bluff." I turned back to Garrett. "Here's what's going to happen. Catherine and I are leaving together. We're taking all her research, all her samples, and all her documentation. You're going to step aside and let us go." Garrett laughed, a harsh sound. "Or what? Or I make a phone call to the friend who's waiting to hear from me. The friend who works for the USGS and has copies of Catherine's preliminary reports. The friend who will immediately contact the Interior Department, the Colorado Attorney General, and every geology journal in the country if anything happens to us. Your shell company's claims will be investigated, your corporate structure examined, and I suspect some very interesting connections will come to light." It was a bluff, mostly. Sandra had Catherine's samples but not full reports, and I had no idea what kind of connections would or wouldn't be found. But Garrett didn't know that. His expression darkened. "You're making a serious mistake. I've made them before. I've survived them all." I held out my hand to Catherine. "Come on, sweetheart. We're leaving." Catherine hesitated, looking between me and Garrett. I could see the war in her eyes, the part of her that wanted to believe we could win fighting against the part that had been beaten down by threats and Kenneth's betrayal. "Katie, trust me. Please." She took my hand. Garrett moved to block our path. "I can't let you take that research. Then you'll have to stop us physically, which would be assault, in front of a witness, recorded on my phone, which has been streaming to cloud storage since I arrived." Another bluff. My phone was in my purse, not recording anything, but my hand moved toward my pocket with enough conviction that Garrett's eyes followed the motion. It was enough. Catherine and I moved past him, clutching the journal and laptop, walking quickly toward the trail. Every second I expected him to stop us, to grab Catherine, to do something, but he just stood there, his expression murderous. We were 50 yards down the trail when he called out, "This isn't over, Mrs. Calloway. Not even close." I didn't look back. I just kept walking, my hand tight around Catherine's, leading her away from the mine and toward safety. We didn't speak until we reached Kenneth's truck. Catherine had the keys in her pocket, thank heavens. We threw the equipment in the back and drove in tense silence to where I'd left my car. "Follow me," I said. "Don't stop until we're back in Fort Collins. Mom, what you did back there, we'll talk later. Right now, we need to get somewhere safe." Catherine nodded, her hands shaking as she gripped the steering wheel. The drive back was the longest of my life. Every pair of headlights behind us looked threatening. Every slow vehicle ahead seemed suspicious. But we made it to my farmhouse as darkness fell completely, parking both vehicles in the barn where they couldn't be seen from the road. Inside, with doors locked and curtains drawn, Catherine finally broke down. "Kenneth's leaving me," she sobbed. "He's taking their money and leaving me." I held my daughter while she cried, this brilliant woman reduced to heartbreak. But beneath my sympathy, my mind was already working, planning, strategizing. We had the journal. We had the laptop. Catherine said she'd sent samples to Sandra, which meant independent verification was possible. But Garrett and his employers would be coming for us, and next time they wouldn't be caught off guard by a 63-year-old woman's bravado. When Catherine's tears finally subsided, I made us tea and sat across from her at my kitchen table. "Tell me everything," I said. "Every detail, from the beginning. If we're going to fight this, I need to know exactly what we're up against." Catherine wiped her eyes and began to speak. What she told me over the next hour was staggering. 6 weeks ago, she and Kenneth had been conducting routine geological surveys for a mining company interested in copper deposits. During their work, they'd stumbled across unusual rock formations that didn't match typical regional geology. Further investigation revealed concentrations of rare earth elements far exceeding anything previously documented in North America. They'd kept it quiet initially, planning to verify their findings before filing claims. But someone at the lab where they'd sent initial samples must have talked, because within a week, Apex Resources had appeared, claiming prior rights to the area based on century-old mining claims. "The thing is," Catherine said, "those old claims were for silver and copper. They don't automatically convey rights to other minerals found in the same area, especially rare earth elements that weren't even commercially viable when the original claims were filed. There's legal precedent for this. But Apex is arguing otherwise? With lawyers who cost more per hour than I make in a month. And they're not just threatening lawsuits. Mom, someone broke into our house 2 weeks ago. Nothing was taken, but my office was ransacked. My files were photographed. Then Kenneth started getting calls, people offering him jobs, offering money, suggesting it would be easier to just sell and move on. Intimidation. Yes, and it worked on Kenneth. He's terrified. Thinks we're going to lose everything if we fight." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "He said I had to choose between the discovery and our marriage. When I wouldn't agree to sell, he started sleeping in the guest room. Started having meetings with Garrett without me. I found the contract they'd drawn up. It had Kenneth's signature, but not mine. He was planning to sign for both of us, claim I'd authorized it. Fraud, then, on top of everything else." "That's why you went into hiding?" "I took the most critical evidence and came out here to buy time. I thought if I could just finish documenting everything, get independent verification, prove the value of what we'd found, Kenneth would see we could win this fight. But instead," she gestured helplessly, "instead, he's chosen Garrett's side." Catherine nodded miserably. I sat back, my mind racing through possibilities. We had evidence. But Apex had lawyers and money and apparently no ethical boundaries. We had the truth, but truth didn't always win against power. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You made a very foolish choice tonight, Mrs. Calloway. There are consequences for interfering in business matters you don't understand." I showed it to Catherine. Her face went white. "They're not going to stop," she whispered. "No," I agreed. "They're not. Which means we need to go on offense." "What do you mean?" I thought of Sandra, of the samples she'd receive in a few days. I thought of the journal full of documentation, the laptop with data. I thought of my daughter's brilliant mind and my own hard-won experience fighting people who thought they were untouchable. I mean, we fight back, but not the way they expect. I leaned forward, an idea forming. "Katie, how long would it take you to compile everything, all your research, into a comprehensive report?" "A few days, if I work around the clock." "Why?" "Because we're not going to fight Apex in court. We're going to fight them in the court of public opinion. We're going to publish your findings, make them public knowledge, before they can bury them." Catherine's eyes widened. That would burn every bridge I have in the industry. No mining company would ever hire me again if I just published a major discovery without proper claim procedures. "Would you rather let them steal it?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then something shifted in her expression, a hardening of resolve I recognized. It was the same look I'd seen in the mirror 20 years ago when the bank came for our farm. "No," she said softly. "I'd rather burn it all down than let them take what's mine." "Good. Then let's get to work." We were still sitting at the table, planning our next moves, when headlights swept across the front windows. A car was coming up my long driveway. Catherine and I looked at each other, fear spiking between us. "Did you tell anyone you were coming here?" I asked. "No one except—" "Oh no." "What?" "I called Thomas earlier, told him I was safe, that I was with you." "Mom, what if Kenneth made him tell—" The knock on the door was firm, authoritative. Not Garrett's style. I moved to the window and peeked through the curtain. A police cruiser sat in my driveway, lights off. And standing on my porch was Sheriff Bradley Morrison, a man I'd known for 15 years. But the grim expression on his face told me this wasn't a social call. I opened the door. "Rose," he said heavily, "I need to speak with Catherine Lewis. There's been a complaint filed against her. I'm sorry, but I'm going to need her to come down to the station." Sheriff Morrison had known me since before Robert died. He'd bought hay from our farm, attended community potlucks, helped us round up escaped cattle more than once. The regret in his eyes was genuine, which somehow made it worse. "What kind of complaint?" I asked, blocking the doorway. "Theft of proprietary mineral samples, trespassing on private mining claims, and destruction of commercial property." He shifted uncomfortably. "Rose, I don't want to do this, but the complaint comes from Apex Resources International. They've got documentation, photographs, witness statements. I have to follow procedure. Can I see the documentation?" "It's back at the station. Catherine can review it there." Catherine appeared behind me, her face pale but composed. "Sheriff Morrison, I'm the one who discovered those mineral deposits. I have every right to take samples from my own claim. According to Apex, they hold prior rights to the property. Now, I'm not saying they're right or you're wrong, but that's for the courts to decide. Right now, I need you to come make a statement. Am I under arrest? Not yet. But if you refuse to cooperate, I'll have to consider it." I felt Catherine's hand on my shoulder, gently moving me aside. "It's okay, Mom. I'll go." "Absolutely not. Sheriff, my daughter has committed no crime. This is harassment, pure and simple. Apex Resources is using you to intimidate a woman who's done nothing but her job." Morrison's jaw tightened. "I understand your feelings, Rose, but I have a legal obligation. To investigate complaints, yes. But you also have an obligation to recognize when someone's manipulating the system. Did Apex provide any evidence that their claims are actually valid? Or just expensive lawyers and threatening letters? They provided documentation from the Bureau of Land Management showing registered mineral rights dating back to 1887. For silver and copper," Catherine interjected. "Not rare earth elements. The legal framework for those minerals didn't even exist in 1887. "That's above my pay grade, Catherine. You'll need to explain it to the DA. My stomach dropped. "The district attorney is involved?" "Not yet officially, but if Catherine doesn't cooperate, it'll escalate. Look, I'm trying to help here. Come down voluntarily, make your statement, and we can probably resolve this without formal charges. But if you make me get a warrant..." I saw the trap closing. If Catherine refused, she'd look guilty. If she went voluntarily, she'd be walking into a system designed to overwhelm her with legal pressure. Either way, Apex would use it to strengthen their position. "I want to call our lawyer first," I said. "You don't have a lawyer," Catherine said quietly. "Then we'll get one. Sheriff, give us 30 minutes. Morrison checked his watch. 20 minutes. "Then I'm coming back with a warrant." He returned to his cruiser, but didn't leave. Just sat there with the engine running, watching the house, making sure we didn't run. Inside, I grabbed my phone and called Sandra. "Rose? Thank God. I've been trying to reach Catherine. We need a lawyer. The best one you know, and we need them now." "What happened?" I explained quickly. Sandra listened without interrupting, then said, "I know someone. Elaine Voss. She specializes in mineral rights law, and she doesn't back down from corporate bullies. But Rose, she's expensive." "How expensive?" $500 an hour, minimum, and a case like this could take months. I looked at Catherine, saw her shaking her head. We both knew she didn't have that kind of money. Kenneth controlled most of their accounts, and I suspected those would be frozen or emptied soon if they weren't already. "I'll pay it," I said. "Mom, no." I held up a hand. "I have Robert's life insurance money. I've barely touched it. This is exactly what he'd want me to use it for." "Rose," Sandra said, "even with a good lawyer, if Apex has the resources I think they do, they can drag this out until Catherine's broken. Are you sure? Get me Elaine Voss. Now." 10 minutes later, I was on a video call with a woman in her 50s wearing a sharp blazer and an even sharper expression. Elaine Voss listened to Catherine's explanation of the discovery, examined photos of the journal entries that Catherine showed her, and asked pointed questions about the timeline and documentation. The good news, Elaine said finally, is that you followed proper protocols. The bad news is that Apex knows how to exploit gray areas in century-old mining law. This will be a fight, and it won't be cheap or quick. Can you take the case? I asked. I can. But you need to understand what you're up against. Apex Resources is owned by a holding company called Meridian Group, which is owned by an investment fund called Tarrant Capital. Tarrant's major shareholders include 3 billionaires, 2 sitting senators, and a former Secretary of the Interior. These people don't lose because they can't afford to. Catherine's face went even paler. Former Secretary of the Interior? They have someone with influence over the Bureau of Land Management? Had. But those connections don't disappear. Rose. Catherine, if you proceed with this, they will come after you with everything. They'll audit your taxes, investigate your background, drag your name through the media. They'll make it expensive, exhausting, and humiliating. And even if you win, the legal fees alone could bankrupt you. But we can win, I pressed. Elaine was quiet for a moment. Honestly, I'd say 60-40 odds. Maybe 70-30 if we can prove bad faith on Apex's part. But those aren't comfortable numbers when you're betting your life savings. I looked at Catherine, saw the defeat creeping back into her eyes. She was ready to give up, to take the $5 million and walk away from her life's greatest achievement. I couldn't let that happen. Take the case, I said. Draw up whatever paperwork you need. But first, tell Sheriff Morrison that Catherine is exercising her right to legal counsel and won't be making any statements tonight. Elaine's smile was predatory. I can do better than that. I'll inform the sheriff that any arrest would be premature, potentially actionable, and very publicly embarrassing when the facts come out. Give me his number. 5 minutes later, Morrison's cruiser pulled out of my driveway, taillights disappearing into the night. But I knew it was a temporary reprieve. We bought ourselves time, Elaine said. Maybe 48 hours before they escalate. Catherine, I need you to compile everything. Every note, every sample log, every photograph. I need to build an airtight case that you discovered this deposit independently and followed every legal requirement. What about Kenneth? Catherine asked quietly. He signed documents claiming he represented both of us. Could that affect our case? It could complicate things. Is he still your husband legally? Yes. Then technically, in Colorado, he may have had authority to sign on your behalf for some community property matters. We'll need to challenge that. Prove he acted without your consent. Do you have any written communication where you explicitly told him not to sign? Catherine shook her head miserably. What about the break-in at your house? I asked. Isn't that evidence of harassment? Did you file a police report? No, Catherine admitted. We didn't even realize what they'd taken until later. Just photographed files, copied data. Nothing obviously missing. Elaine sighed. Then it's your word against theirs. Not useless, but not the smoking gun we need. She leaned forward. Here's what I recommend. We go on offense. File a civil suit against Apex for harassment, intimidation, and fraudulent claim interference. Force them to defend their actions publicly. It won't be easy, but it might make them negotiate seriously instead of just trying to steamroll you. How long would a lawsuit take? I asked. Months, at minimum. Maybe years if it goes to trial. Years. I saw Catherine processing that, imagining years of legal battles, years of her life consumed by depositions and courtrooms and mounting legal bills. There has to be another way, she said. There is, Elaine said bluntly. Take their money, sign a non-disclosure agreement, walk away. It's not what I'd choose, but it's an option. I stood up, pacing the kitchen. My farmhouse suddenly felt too small, the walls closing in. Outside those walls, powerful people were mobilizing resources to crush my daughter. Inside, we had determination and limited funds, but we also had something they didn't: the truth. An idea began forming, risky and radical. What if we don't fight them in court? I said slowly. Both women looked at me. What if we publish Catherine's findings before they can stop us? Make the discovery public knowledge. Once it's out there, Apex can't bury it. That would torpedo any chance of Catherine developing the site herself, Elaine warned. Once you publish, anyone can file claims based on your research. But at least she'd get credit for the discovery, I countered. Her name would be attached to it forever. They can't steal that. Catherine was staring at me with a mix of horror and hope. Mom, if I publish without going through proper channels, I'd be blackballed from the industry. No company would ever hire me again. I'd lose my university position, my consulting contracts, everything. Would you rather lose yourself? Katie, I've watched you compromise for 18 years. Compromise with Kenneth about where to live, what jobs to take, how to raise Thomas. You've always put everyone else first. Maybe it's time to put yourself first, even if it costs you everything. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I don't know if I'm brave enough. You're the bravest person I know. You went into hiding to protect your discovery. You stood up to Garrett. You're still fighting when most people would have quit days ago. My phone buzzed. Another unknown number. I answered it on speaker. Mrs. Calloway? A woman's voice, professional and cold. This is Barbara Jenkins from Tarrant Capital Management. I understand you've retained legal counsel regarding the Moffat County mineral dispute. I met Catherine's eyes. They'd found out about Elaine in less than an hour. The speed was terrifying. What do you want? I asked. To extend a courtesy before this situation becomes unpleasant. Tarrant Capital is prepared to increase our offer to $7 million in exchange for complete rights transfer and non-disclosure. This offer expires in 24 hours. $7 million. Up from $5 million. They were getting nervous. And if we decline? Then we'll be forced to pursue all available legal remedies. Your daughter will face criminal charges for theft and trespassing. Your property will be subject to civil forfeiture as proceeds from illegal mineral extraction. And you personally will be named in our lawsuit for conspiracy and interference with commercial activities. Civil forfeiture. They would take my farm. The land Robert and I had spent 40 years building. The home where I'd raised Catherine. The only asset I had left. You can't do that, I said. But my voice wavered. We absolutely can, Mrs. Calloway. The law is very clear on profiting from stolen property. And make no mistake, we will prove those mineral samples were stolen from our claim. We have the resources, the legal precedent, and the political connections to make it happen. $7 million is generous. Take it. She hung up. The silence in my kitchen was suffocating. Catherine had gone white, her hands shaking. Even on the video screen, I could see Elaine's jaw tightening. Can they really do that? Catherine whispered. Take Mom's farm. It's a long shot legally, Elaine said carefully. But they could tie it up in litigation for years. Rose, you wouldn't be able to sell, mortgage, or even make improvements while the case was pending. They could effectively make your property worthless. I sank into a chair, the weight of it crushing me. They weren't just threatening Catherine anymore. They were threatening everything I had left of Robert, of my life's work. Maybe we should take the money, Catherine said, her voice breaking. Mom, I can't let them take your farm. I can't. No. Mom, no. I stood up again, fury replacing fear. This is exactly what they want. They want us scared, desperate, willing to accept whatever scraps they throw us. But I didn't spend 40 years fighting for this farm just to hand it over to corporate thugs because they made threats. Rose, Elaine said gently, I admire your spirit, but you need to think practically. I am thinking practically. Practically, we have about 12 hours before they escalate again. Practically, we're outgunned in every conventional fight. So we need to do something unconventional. Like what? Catherine asked. I looked at my daughter. Really looked at her. Brilliant. Accomplished. Beaten down by years of compromise and now facing the fight of her life. She needed to see that it was possible to win against impossible odds. I'd done it once, when the bank tried to take our farm. I could do it again. We go public, I said. But not just with the scientific findings. With everything. The harassment, the break-ins, the threats. We make Apex and Tarrant Capital defend their actions in front of the whole world. That's incredibly risky, Elaine warned. You'd be painting a target on your backs. The target's already there. At least this way, everyone will be watching when they pull the trigger. Catherine was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. You're serious? Completely. Elaine, Can you draft a press release? Something that lays out the discovery, Catherine's credentials, and the timeline of events, including the intimidation? I can. But Rose, once you do this, there's no going back. You'll be declaring war. Then we'd better win. After Elaine disconnected, promising to have documents ready by morning, Catherine and I sat in heavy silence. Mom, what if we lose? What if they take everything? I reached across the table and took her hands. Then we'll have lost fighting for what's right, instead of winning by surrendering. Katie, your father spent his whole life working this land. He died too young, but he died proud of what we'd built. I won't dishonor his memory by giving up our home to criminals just because they have expensive lawyers. But if we fight and lose, at least you'll know what your mother was made of. And maybe, just maybe, you'll find out what you're made of too. As she squeezed my hands, tears streaming down her face. I'm so scared. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. We were still sitting there when headlights swept across the windows again. My heart jumped, but this time it wasn't the sheriff. It was Kenneth's truck. Catherine stood up, her whole body tensing. I can't face him, not now. Then don't. Go upstairs. I'll handle this. Mom, go. She fled upstairs as the knock came. I opened the door to find my son-in-law, looking haggard and desperate. Rose, I need to talk to Catherine. She doesn't want to see you. Please. I know I've made mistakes, but this has gotten out of control. Apex's lawyers are saying Catherine could face federal charges. Prison time. I'm trying to fix this before it's too late. By signing away her rights? He flinched. By accepting reality. We can't win this fight. They're too powerful, too connected. But if we take their offer now, tonight, before they escalate further, at least we'll walk away with something. $7 million and your soul. That's not fair. Isn't it? You betrayed your wife, Kenneth. You conspired with the people trying to rob her. And now you're here pretending it's for her own good? His face hardened. I'm trying to save her from herself. Catherine's brilliant, but she's stubborn. She doesn't know when to quit. Someone has to protect her, even if it's from her own pride. Her pride? This is about her life's work, her integrity, It's about $30 billion, he shouted. Do you understand that? $30 billion. And we're two geologists from Boulder who found it by accident. We're not equipped to fight Tarrant Capital. They'll destroy us, Rose. They'll destroy all of us. Only if we let them. He stared at me, and I saw the moment he realized I wasn't going to back down. His expression shifted from desperate to something colder. Fine, he said quietly. Then I'm filing for divorce. And I'm going to testify that Catherine stole those samples from Apex's property, that she knew they had prior claims and took them anyway. I'll give them everything they need to put her in prison. The words hit like a physical blow. You wouldn't. I don't want to. But they've made it clear that if I cooperate, I'll be protected. If I don't, I go down with her. I have to think about Thomas, about his future. His future with a father who betrayed his mother to save himself? Kenneth's face crumpled. For a moment, I saw the young man Catherine had fallen in love with, earnest and passionate about geology. Then it hardened again into something I didn't recognize. Tell Catherine she has until noon tomorrow to sign the agreement. After that, I do what I have to do. He left without another word. I stood in the doorway, watching his taillights disappear, and felt the full weight of what we were facing. Not just a corporation with unlimited resources, but a family member turned enemy. Kenneth would testify against Catherine. He'd use his insider knowledge to help Apex build their case. We'd just lost our most important potential witness and gained our most dangerous opponent. Upstairs, I heard Catherine crying. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last, and found my daughter curled on the guest bed, sobbing into a pillow. I lay down beside her, held her the way I had when she was small and the world seemed too big and scary. We're going to lose everything, aren't we? She whispered. Maybe, I admitted. But we'll lose it fighting. And sometimes, Katie, that's all the victory we get. She cried herself to sleep in my arms. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, planning our next move. We had less than 12 hours before Kenneth's ultimatum expired. less than 24 before Tarrant Capital's offer expired. And somewhere in that narrowing window, we had to find a way to fight back against enemies who seemed to hold all the cards. But I hadn't survived 63 years by giving up when things looked impossible. I'd survived by getting creative. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with Catherine's laptop, her journal, and decades of experience dealing with people who underestimated me. By dawn, I had a plan. It wasn't a good plan. It required perfect timing, a bit of luck, and the cooperation of people who had every reason to refuse. But it was the only plan we had. Catherine came downstairs at 6, her eyes red and swollen. "I've been thinking about Kenneth's ultimatum." "Don't," I said firmly. "We're not taking their offer. Mom, they'll take your farm. Let me worry about the farm. Right now, I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "What do you need?" "First, call Sandra. Tell her we need those sample results today, not in a few days. Whatever it takes, we need independent verification of your discovery by this afternoon." "That's impossible. The analysis takes..." "Then have her send what she has. Preliminary results. Anything that confirms the presence of rare earth elements. We don't need perfection. We just need proof you weren't lying." Catherine pulled out her phone with shaking hands. While she made the call, I contacted Elaine Voss. The lawyer answered on the second ring, sounding alert despite the early hour. "Rose, I've been up all night working on your press release, but I have to warn you, if we go public before Tarrant's deadline, they'll see it as an act of war." "Good. Let them." "Elaine, I need you to do something else. File an emergency injunction against Apex Resources. Claim they're attempting to fraudulently enforce invalid mineral claims. Make enough noise that it catches media attention. An emergency injunction requires evidence of immediate harm. Kenneth's threat to testify against Catherine. That's coercion, witness tampering. And the threat against my property is attempted civil forfeiture based on fraudulent claims. That's immediate harm." Elaine was quiet for a moment. "It's thin, but I can try. Rose, what are you planning?" "To force them into a public confrontation before they can control the narrative. Can you do it?" "I can file by 9 a.m., but Rose, this will burn through your retainer in hours. And if we lose, we're already losing. At least this way, we're losing on our terms." After hanging up, I made 3 more calls. First to the Boulder Daily Camera newspaper, requesting an interview about mineral rights corruption. Then to Colorado Public Radio, pitching a story about corporate intimidation of small-scale geologists. Finally, to an investigative journalist I'd met years ago at a farming conference, a woman who'd built her career exposing corporate malfeasance. 2 of the 3 agreed to meet with us that afternoon. Catherine ended her call with Sandra, her face pale. "She can have preliminary results by noon. She's calling in favors, running samples herself." "But Mom, she said the USGS director got a call this morning from someone in Washington, asking questions about her work with me. Someone's already trying to pressure her." "Then we move faster. Get dressed. We're leaving in 30 minutes. "Where are we going?" "To see Thomas." Catherine's face crumpled. "Mom, I can't. Not after what Kenneth..." "Thomas is 16 years old and caught between his parents. He deserves to hear the truth from you before Kenneth poisons him against you completely. And Katie, we need him. Need him for what? To testify about what he's seen. The break-in, Kenneth's meetings with Garrett, the changes in Kenneth's behavior. Thomas is the one person who's been inside your house, seen everything, and can't be dismissed as biased. He's a child. I won't drag him into this. He's already in it. The question is whether we let Kenneth control his understanding of events, or whether we give him the truth and let him decide for himself." Catherine looked torn but finally nodded. "Okay, but Mom, if he takes Kenneth's side, then we deal with it. But at least we'll have tried." The drive to Boulder was tense. Catherine kept checking her phone, waiting for Kenneth's ultimatum to arrive in writing. I kept watching the rearview mirror, half expecting to see police cruisers or Garrett's vehicle following us. We arrived at Catherine's house at 8 a.m. Kenneth's truck was gone, probably already at his office or meeting with lawyers. Catherine used her key to let us in, calling for Thomas. He appeared at the top of the stairs, backpack in hand, clearly about to leave for school. When he saw his mother, his face went through a complicated series of emotions: relief, guilt, anger, confusion. "Mom, what are you doing here? I need to talk to you. Both of us do." Catherine's voice was steady, but I could see her hands shaking. "Please, sweetheart. Just give us 10 minutes. Thomas glanced at his phone, clearly torn. "Dad said I shouldn't talk to you without him present." "Did he say why?" "He said you're in trouble. That you took something that didn't belong to you and now people are trying to help, but you won't listen." Catherine flinched. I stepped forward. "Thomas, your mother made one of the most important geological discoveries in decades. People are trying to steal it from her. Your father is helping them." "That's not what Dad says. He says Mom's being stubborn, that she's going to get us all in trouble." "Did your father tell you he's planning to testify against your mother in court?" I asked quietly. "Did he mention he's filing for divorce and trying to take everything from her?" Thomas went white. "He wouldn't. He said he was trying to protect us." "By betraying her?" "Thomas, sit down, please. Let us explain what's really happening." For a terrible moment, I thought he'd refuse. Then he slowly walked down the stairs and sat on the couch, his young face hard with suspicion and hurt. Catherine sat across from him and told him everything. The discovery, the threats, the break-in we now knew was connected to Apex, Kenneth's secret meetings, the pressure to sign away her rights. She spoke calmly, factually, showing him entries from her journal, photographs of the site, documentation of her proper filing procedures. Thomas listened in silence, his expression increasingly distressed. "Dad said you're being paranoid," he said when she finished. "That you're seeing conspiracies where there's just normal business competition." "Normal business competition doesn't involve break-ins and threats?" I said. "Normal business competition doesn't involve trying to take someone's home because they won't surrender." "They threatened Grandma's farm?" Thomas's voice cracked. "They did. Yesterday." Catherine showed him her phone, the message from Barbara Jenkins. "This is what we're facing, Thomas. This is why I went into hiding. Not because I'm paranoid, but because I'm being hunted." Thomas read the message, his hands starting to shake. "But Dad said if you just took the money, everything would be fine. That we'd be rich and you could do research without worrying about funding and I'd have to pretend I never made the discovery." Catherine interrupted gently. "I'd have to sign a non-disclosure agreement saying I wouldn't tell anyone what I found. My life's greatest achievement would belong to someone else, and I'd have to stay silent about it forever. Would you want that, if you'd done something amazing? Would you want to give it away and never speak of it again?" Tears spilled down Thomas's cheeks. "But they're going to arrest you. Dad showed me the papers. He was crying, Mom. He said he couldn't watch you go to prison." "Those papers are scare tactics," I said. "Your mother broke no laws, but these people are powerful enough to make the legal process feel like punishment, even if they never win a conviction. That's what they're counting on. That we'll be too afraid to fight." "So what are you going to do?" Catherine looked at me, and I saw the moment she made her decision. The fear was still there, but underneath it was something stronger. The same stubborn determination that had made her spend childhood afternoons cataloging rocks when other kids were playing. "We're going to fight," she said. "We're going to make the discovery public, expose what Apex is doing, and force them to prove their claims in the open where everyone can see. It's risky, and we might lose everything, but at least we'll lose with integrity." Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I want to help." "Thomas, no. Mom, I'm not a kid anymore. And I've seen things. Stuff I didn't think was important, but now." He pulled out his phone. "Dad's been having these meetings in his office at home. I recorded one, just because it sounded weird and I thought maybe I was missing something. I didn't understand it then, but maybe it matters now." He pulled up a recording, dated 5 days ago. Kenneth's voice came through clearly. "I understand the timeline is tight, but Catherine's refusing to be reasonable. If I sign the documents, will your company guarantee I won't face any liability?" Garrett's voice responded. "As long as you maintain that you had authority to represent your wife's interests, yes, we'll shield you from any legal consequences. But Lewis, you need to understand, if Catherine continues to resist, we'll have to pursue more aggressive strategies. It would be better for everyone if you could convince her to cooperate. What if I can't? Then we proceed without her cooperation. We've dealt with difficult claimants before. They always come around eventually. The recording ended. Catherine was staring at Thomas with something like awe. You recorded this? I record a lot of stuff. YouTube videos, game commentary, whatever. My phone's always recording something. He scrolled through his files. I've got like 6 recordings from the past 2 weeks. Dad talking to Garrett. Dad on the phone with lawyers. Dad arguing with someone about whether they could really take Grandma's farm. Thomas, I said carefully, these recordings could be evidence. They prove Kenneth knew he didn't have authority to sign for your mother. They prove Apex knew their claims were questionable. This could change everything. Will it help Mom? It might save her. He nodded firmly. Then use them. I don't care if Dad gets mad. He shouldn't have lied. Catherine pulled her son into a fierce hug, both of them crying. I stepped away, giving them privacy, and called Elaine. We have evidence, I said. Recordings proving Kenneth acted without authority and that Apex knew they were on shaky legal ground. Can you use this? Absolutely. Email them to me immediately. Rose, this changes everything. If we can prove Apex knowingly tried to defraud Catherine through her husband, their entire case collapses. I heard the excitement in her voice, the smell of blood in the water. What about the criminal charges? Baseless. Completely baseless with this evidence. I'll have them dismissed by end of day. For the first time in days, I felt hope. We left Catherine's house at 9:30 with Thomas's recordings, a plan, and renewed determination. Thomas chose to come with us, sending a message to his school about a family emergency. Catherine tried to argue, but he was resolute. I'm not letting you fight alone, he said, sounding so much older than 16. That's what family does. We fight together. At 11 a.m., Sandra called with preliminary results. The samples contained rare earth elements in concentrations that exceeded any previously documented North American deposit. Conservative estimates put the value at $20 billion, possibly more. At 11:30, Elaine filed her emergency injunction, attaching Thomas's recordings as evidence of fraud and coercion. At noon, Kenneth's ultimatum deadline passed without response from us. At 12:15, my phone rang. Barbara Jenkins from Tarrant Capital. Mrs. Calloway, you've made a very serious mistake. Filing a frivolous injunction, making accusations you can't prove. We can prove them. We have recordings. We have independent verification of the discovery. We have documentation of every threat you've made. And by 3 p.m. today, we'll have given all of it to the media. Silence on the other end. You're bluffing, she said finally. But I heard the uncertainty. Try me. You have until 3 p.m. to withdraw your claims, issue a public apology, and negotiate a fair licensing agreement for the mineral rights. After that, I'm unleashing every journalist I can find. They'll dig into Tarrant Capital's corporate structure, your political connections, every shady deal you've made. How do you think your billionaire investors will feel when their names are attached to a scandal about bullying a female scientist? We'll bury you in litigation. Then you'll do it in front of cameras, your choice. Settlement or scandal. I hung up before she could respond. Catherine was staring at me with wide eyes. Mom, what if they call our bluff? Then we go through with it. We've already scheduled the interviews. The journalists are expecting us at 2 p.m. I checked my watch, which means we have 2 hours to prepare our statement. Thomas grinned, looking more like himself. Grandma, you're kind of scary when you're angry. You have no idea, sweetheart. We spent the next hour at a coffee shop, crafting our statement with Elaine's help over video call. Catherine laid out the scientific details of her discovery. Thomas provided context about the pressure his family had faced. I described the threats against my property and the systematic intimidation we'd experienced. It was damning, detailed, impossible to dismiss as paranoia or exaggeration. At 1:30, as we were finishing final edits, a car pulled up outside the coffee shop. Garrett stepped out, accompanied by 2 people in expensive suits. Lawyers, undoubtedly. My phone rang. Barbara Jenkins again. We're prepared to negotiate, she said, her voice tight. But you need to call off the media. Negotiate what? A licensing agreement. Apex Resources will acknowledge Catherine Lewis as the discoverer of record. She'll retain scientific credit and receive royalties on any commercial development. 20% of net proceeds. 20%. It wasn't everything, but it was something. More than the $7 million they'd offered before, and it came with public recognition. 30%, I said, and a guarantee of no retaliation. No lawsuits, no criminal complaints, no threats against anyone in my family. That includes divorce proceedings. Kenneth withdraws his filing. 25%, and we can't control Kenneth's personal decisions. Then Kenneth goes down with you when we publish. The recordings make it clear he was conspiring with Apex to defraud his wife. How do you think that plays in divorce court? In criminal court? Another long silence. 30%, she said finally. Full recognition. No retaliation clause. But you sign a non-disparagement agreement. No public criticism of Apex or Tarrant Capital. We'll reserve the right to accurate reporting of facts if asked directly. Otherwise, agreed. And the injunction gets withdrawn. The moment the contract is signed and verified by our lawyer, we'll have documents to you within the hour. She hung up. I looked at Catherine and Thomas, both staring at me with something like wonder. Did we just win? Catherine whispered. We won enough, I said. You get credit for your discovery. You get paid fairly. And we all walk away intact. But they get to develop it. They get the majority of the profits. They have the capital and infrastructure to actually make it happen, Elaine said over the video call. Catherine, this is a victory. A real one. Most people fighting corporations this size end up with nothing. You're getting recognition and 30% of billions. That's extraordinary. Catherine looked at Thomas. What do you think? He considered for a moment, then said, I think Grandma just out-negotiated billionaires. And I think you proved you don't have to be young to be tough. I laughed, surprising myself. When was the last time I'd laughed? Garrett approached our table, his expression carefully neutral. Mrs. Calloway, Dr. Lewis. I've been authorized to extend our apologies for any misunderstandings during this process. We acted on incomplete information regarding claim ownership. We're pleased to reach an amicable resolution. Misunderstandings, I repeated flatly. Is that what you call breaking into someone's home and threatening their family? His jaw tightened, but he maintained his professional demeanor. The contracts will be ready for signature by 3 p.m. Our legal team is drafting them now. Make sure the non-retaliation clause is ironclad, Catherine said, her voice steady. And I want public acknowledgement of my discovery, in writing, within the week. It will be done. He left without another word. We sat in silence for a moment, the magnitude of what had just happened settling over us. Is it really over? Thomas asked. Not quite, Elaine said. Don't celebrate until the contracts are signed and verified. But yes, Thomas, I think the worst is over. Catherine reached across the table and took my hand. Mom, you were incredible. How did you know they'd back down? Because bullies always back down when you stand up to them. And because they weren't just afraid of losing the case, they were afraid of losing their reputations. In the end, that mattered more than the money. We waited in the coffee shop, drinking tea and watching the clock. At 2:45, Elaine called back. Contracts just arrived. I'm reviewing them now. Hold on. The longest 15 minutes of my life passed while Elaine read through pages of legal documents. Finally, they're clean. Better than clean, actually. The non-retaliation clause includes Kenneth specifically. He can't pursue the divorce or testify against Catherine in any proceeding related to the mineral claims. He's bound by the same terms as Apex. He'll hate that, Catherine said quietly. Probably, I agreed. But at least you're protected from him. At 3 p.m. exactly, Catherine signed the contracts electronically, witnessed by Elaine and notarized remotely. Thomas watched over her shoulder, and I stood behind them both, my hand on Catherine's shoulder. It was done. My daughter's greatest discovery would bear her name. She would be compensated fairly. And we had survived. Outside the coffee shop, Garrett stood by his car, phone pressed to his ear. When he saw us emerge, he nodded once, a gesture that might have been respect. We drove back to my farmhouse in the fading afternoon light, exhausted, but victorious. "What happens now?" Thomas asked from the back seat. "Now?" Catherine smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen on her face in days. "Now, we figure out how to live with what we've learned about the people we trusted. And we move forward." "What about Dad?" Catherine's smile faded. "I don't know, honey. That's going to be complicated. But for tonight, we didn't have to solve everything. We just had to rest, recover, and remember that sometimes David didn't beat Goliath." 3 weeks after we signed the contracts, Catherine received her first royalty payment. It wasn't the full 30% yet, just an advance against future development, but it was enough to change everything. Enough to hire her own lawyer for the divorce proceedings. Enough to put a down payment on a new house, away from the memories of Kenneth's betrayal. Enough to prove that standing up to power could actually work. I sat on my porch that April morning, watching the sun rise over fields Robert and I had planted together decades ago. The farm was safe. More than safe. Catherine had insisted on paying off the mortgage entirely, clearing a debt I'd carried for 20 years. The land was mine, free and clear, a legacy I could choose to keep or pass on without the weight of financial burden. The sound of tires on gravel announced Catherine's arrival. She'd been coming out to the farm every few days, bringing Thomas when he wasn't in school, slowly rebuilding a life that had been shattered by Kenneth's choices. She climbed the porch steps carrying a box and a thermos of coffee. "Morning, Mom." "Morning, sweetheart. What's in the box?" The published report. It came out in the Journal of Geosciences yesterday. She opened the box to reveal a stack of printed journals. The cover article read, "Discovery of High-Grade Rare Earth Element Deposits in Northwestern Colorado," by Dr. Catherine Lewis. Her name. In print. Attached to one of the most significant geological discoveries of the decade. I watched her face as she held the journal. Saw the complicated emotions playing across it. Pride, certainly. But also sadness for what the discovery had cost her. "Have you heard from Kenneth?" I asked gently. "His lawyer sent papers yesterday. He's not contesting the divorce anymore. Too expensive. Especially now that I can afford better legal representation than he can." She sat down in the rocking chair beside mine. "He sent a message through Thomas. Said he was sorry, that he'd been scared and made terrible decisions." "Do you believe him?" "I believe he was scared. I believe he made terrible decisions." She paused. "I don't believe sorry is enough to undo what he did." We sat in silence, rocking gently. A hawk circled overhead, riding the morning thermals. The same sky, the same land, but everything different now. "Thomas is doing better," Catherine offered. "His therapist says he's processing the divorce in a healthy way. He's angry at his father, but he's not internalizing it. He's a good kid, strong, like his mother." Catherine smiled slightly. "He keeps talking about what you did. How you stood up to everyone, how you out-negotiated billionaires. He wrote an essay about it for his English class. His teacher called me, said it was one of the most powerful pieces of writing she'd seen from a student in years. I'd like to read it. I brought you a copy." She pulled a folder from her bag and handed it to me. I opened it and began to read Thomas's careful handwriting. "My grandmother is 63 years old. Most people that age are retired, playing golf, visiting grandchildren. My grandmother negotiated with billionaires and won. This essay is about what I learned watching her fight for my mother when everyone else had given up." I had to stop reading as tears blurred my vision. Catherine reached over and squeezed my hand. "You saved us, Mom. Not just from Apex, but from ourselves. From giving up. From accepting that powerful people always win." "They don't always win," I said quietly. "They just want you to think they do. It makes their job easier when people surrender without fighting." A car appeared at the end of the driveway. Sandra, Catherine's friend from the USGS. She'd become a regular visitor over the past weeks, helping Catherine prepare the publication, providing expertise and support through the chaos. Sandra climbed out, carrying pastries and more coffee. I brought breakfast and news. We moved inside to the kitchen table, the same table where Catherine and I had planned our defense 3 weeks ago. It felt different now, less like a war room and more like a home again. "The news first," Sandra said, her eyes bright. The director of the USGS called me this morning. They want to fund a comprehensive survey of the entire region based on Catherine's discovery. It's a 3-year project, full funding, and they want Catherine to lead it. Catherine's mouth fell open. What? But I'm not a federal employee, I can't. They're creating a special consultant position. It comes with a full salary, benefits, research budget, and the prestige of an official government appointment. Catherine, this is huge. They're essentially validating your work at the highest level. I watched my daughter's face transform from shock to understanding to joy. This wasn't just a job. It was recognition from her peers, acknowledgement that she was more than just someone who got lucky with a discovery. She was a scientist worthy of leading major research. There's more, Sandra continued. National Geographic wants to do a feature story on the discovery and the fight to protect it. They're calling it The Geologist Who Stood Against Corporate Greed. The writer wants to interview all of you, including you, Rose. Me? I'm not a geologist. No, but you're the mother who took on Tarrant Capital and won. That's a story people need to hear. Catherine was staring at the USGS offer letter Sandra had placed on the table. 3 years. Based out of the regional office in Denver. I could afford a place there, close enough to visit regularly but far enough to start fresh. What about Thomas? I asked. The school year ends in 2 months. He could finish here, then we'd move over summer. New school, new start, away from all the reminders of Kenneth. I saw the hope in her eyes, the possibility of rebuilding. It was what she needed, what they both needed. It's perfect, I said. Take it. Over breakfast, we made plans. Catherine would accept the USGS position, begin preliminary work immediately while finishing the spring semester teaching. Thomas would stay with me on weekends, helping with farm work and enjoying the space to process everything that had happened. The divorce would be finalized by summer. After Sandra left, Catherine and I walked the property together. The fields needed planting soon. The fence line needed repair. Normal work, familiar rhythms. It grounded me after weeks of chaos. Mom, Catherine said as we stood by the old barn, I've been thinking about this place, about what happens to it long term. I'm not going anywhere for a while yet. I know, but when the time comes, I'd like Thomas to have it. To learn to take care of it the way you and Dad did. To understand that some things are worth fighting for, worth preserving. I looked at the land Robert and I had built our life on. Land that had almost been taken by the bank, then by Tarrant Capital's threats. Land that had survived because we'd refused to surrender. I think that's exactly what your father would have wanted, I said. We were heading back to the house when another car pulled up. I didn't recognize it until Elaine Voss stepped out, looking pleased with herself. I hope you don't mind the unannounced visit, she said, but I have documents that require immediate signatures, and I wanted to deliver them personally. We reconvened at the kitchen table. Elaine spread out papers with official seals and dense legal text. As of this morning, she explained, the State Attorney General has opened an investigation into Apex Resources business practices. Your case wasn't the first time they've used questionable tactics to acquire mineral rights. 3 other geologists have come forward with similar stories after your settlement became public knowledge. We signed a non-disparagement agreement, Catherine said carefully. You did, but the recordings Thomas provided became part of the public court record when we filed the injunction. Any journalist can access them, and several have. Apex is facing serious legal scrutiny, and Tarrant Capital is distancing themselves from the whole mess. Elaine pulled out another document. More importantly, the BLM has launched a review of century-old mining claims across the western states. They're questioning whether dormant claims should automatically convey rights to newly discovered minerals. If they rule the way I think they will, it could revolutionize mineral rights law. Because of us? I asked. Because Catherine had the courage to fight, instead of quietly accepting a buyout. Change doesn't happen when people surrender, Rose. It happens when they stand up and force the system to confront its flaws. She handed Catherine a final document. And this is my favorite part. Kenneth's lawyer contacted me yesterday. He's willing to accept a very modest divorce settlement. No claims on your royalties, no fight for custody, just a clean break. I suspect the recordings of his conspiracy made him realize he has no leverage and considerable liability. Catherine read through the settlement terms, her expression carefully neutral. I couldn't tell if she felt relief or sadness or some complicated mixture of both. "It's fair," she said finally. "More than fair. I'll sign." After Elaine left with the signed documents, Catherine and I sat on the porch again, watching clouds build over the mountains. "Do you think he'll be okay?" Catherine asked quietly. "Kenneth, I mean. He lost everything. His marriage, his reputation, his moral high ground. He made his choices," I said. "We all have to live with our choices." "I know, but we loved each other once. Before the pressure, before the threats, we were happy. I keep wondering if things could have been different if we'd just taken the money and walked away." "Do you really believe that?" She was quiet for a long moment. "No. Because we would have known we'd surrendered. We would have built a life on that surrender. And it would have poisoned everything. At least this way, even though it hurts. I know I fought for what mattered. That's wisdom, Katie. The hard-won kind." Thomas arrived in the afternoon, dropped off by a friend's parent. He bounded up the porch steps with the energy of youth, seemingly lighter than he'd been in weeks. "Guess what?" he said excitedly. "I got accepted into the summer geology program at CSU, the one Mom told me about. They have spaces for high school students interested in earth sciences." Catherine hugged him fiercely. "That's wonderful. When did you apply?" "Last week. Grandma helped me with the essay." Catherine looked at me with raised eyebrows. I shrugged. He asked for help. What was I supposed to do? The essay question was, "Describe someone who inspired you to pursue geology," Thomas explained. "I wrote about both of you, about how Mom made this amazing discovery and how Grandma fought to protect it." The program director called it the most compelling application narrative she'd received in a decade. I watched grandson and mother embrace, saw the rebuilding of their bond after weeks of strain. This was what victory looked like. Not money, not recognition in journals, but family healing and moving forward. That evening, the three of us made dinner together in my small kitchen. Catherine chopped vegetables while Thomas told stories about school, and I worked on my grandfather's biscuit recipe. Normal things, simple things, the things that mattered most. As we sat down to eat, Thomas raised his water glass. "I want to make a toast." "Go ahead," Catherine said. "To Grandma, for teaching us that you don't have to be young or powerful to win. You just have to be stubborn and smart and willing to fight for what's right. And for teaching us that family stands together," Catherine added, her voice thick with emotion. "Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." We clinked glasses, and I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of resolution. The sense that we'd walked through fire and emerged changed, but not broken. After dinner, Catherine helped with dishes while Thomas explored the barn, looking for the old rock collection I'd mentioned from her childhood. "Mom," Catherine said softly, "I need you to know something. When Kenneth left, when everything was falling apart, I felt like I was drowning. I couldn't see a way forward. I was ready to give up. But you didn't, because you wouldn't let me. You showed me that surrender wasn't the only option, that sometimes the smartest thing you can do is stand your ground and dare them to knock you down." She dried her hands on a towel, turned to face me fully. "You saved my life, not just my career or my discovery. My actual life, the person I am, the person I want to be." I pulled my daughter into a hug, this brilliant woman who'd had to relearn her own strength. "You saved yourself," I said. "I just reminded you that you could." We stood that way for a long moment, mother and daughter, survivors of a battle we'd never expected to fight. Thomas came running back from the barn carrying a dusty box. "I found them! Your rock collection from when you were a kid. Mom, look at this one. Is this actually a geode?" Catherine's face lit up as she examined the rocks she'd collected decades ago. "Oh my gosh, I'd forgotten about these. Look, this one's from that trip to Garden of the Gods. And this one Dad and I found near the creek." I watched them pore over the collection, heads bent together, and felt Robert's presence as clearly as if he were standing beside me. He would have been so proud. Proud of Catherine for fighting, Proud of Thomas for choosing integrity over convenience. Proud of me for refusing to surrender the land we'd built together. The sun was setting when Catherine and Thomas finally prepared to leave. They'd stay the night in Boulder, pack more of Catherine's things, begin the work of dismantling one life and building another. Same time next week? Catherine asked as she hugged me goodbye. Same time, I confirmed. I watched them drive away, taillights fading into dusk, and returned to my porch. The field stretched out before me, dark and fertile, ready for spring planting. Somewhere in those fields, Robert and I had fought our own battles against foreclosure and drought and despair. We'd won some, lost some, survived all of them. Now Catherine was learning the same lessons. That power wasn't about age or wealth or connections. Power was about knowing who you were and refusing to pretend otherwise. Power was about standing your ground when everyone expected you to run. My phone buzzed with a text from Sandra. The National Geographic writer wants to schedule your interview. Are you free next Tuesday? I smiled and typed back, I'll make time. Because this story needed to be told. Not just Catherine's discovery, but the whole truth of what had happened. How a family had been targeted by corporate greed. How they'd fought back with nothing but determination and intelligence. How a 63-year-old woman had stared down billionaires and refused to blink. Other people needed to know it was possible. Other families facing impossible odds needed to see that victory didn't always go to the powerful. Sometimes, it went to the persistent. I sat on my porch as stars emerged one by one. The same stars Robert and I had watched together for 40 years. The same stars that had witnessed every struggle, every triumph, every moment that had shaped this life. Tomorrow I would plant the fields. Next week I would give my interview. Next month I would watch Catherine accept her new position with the USGS. Next year I would see Thomas graduate high school, probably heading off to study geology himself. Life would continue, richer and stranger than I'd ever imagined. But tonight, I simply sat in the darkness and let myself feel what we'd accomplished. We had faced down power. We had refused to surrender. We had won. Not because we were stronger or richer or more connected than our opponents, but because we were willing to fight for what mattered, willing to risk everything, willing to trust that sometimes, just sometimes, truth and determination could overcome money and influence. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of turned earth and growing things. Spring was coming, with all its promise of renewal and growth, and we would be ready for it, together. Now tell me, what would you have done if you were in my place? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out the video on your screen right now. I'm sure it will surprise you.